So ladies, gentlemen of the Bat family out there, I am absolutely ecstatic to bring you my review for that of the Penguin series. Massive shout out to Warner Brothers Discovery for giving me screeners access to the entire season, 8 episodes. But with that being said, this is going to be more of a first impressions review. That might be a little bit all over the place because I got my screeners a little bit late yesterday as of when I'm recording this video, and I'm literally going away on vacation very soon. So I only had, so much time to absorb some of the series. So I'm going to be talking about the first 4 episodes. But that basically works out for me anyway, in all honesty, because I didn't want to watch all this season, because that way I could, speculate in my in-depth breakdown videos week to week after episode 4. But I have seen the first half of the season, so I would say that gives me a pretty darn good impression about, what I could say about the Penguin in this no spoilers review video. That's something I do want to emphasize as well. I try and be as comprehensive as I can be without giving anything away other than what is specifically featured in the trailers and the promos. I do, I guess, as a result of that, want to say that this will only be reflective, my thoughts of those first 4 episodes, and not like the rest of the season, because I can't speak to, what quality they have other than what I have seen. So the first place I guess I want to start off with is, hey Boba, what do you think about the Penguin? Oh man. I don't even know how to begin to articulate this, and I know this is going to come across as like, well, of course Boba loves it, but, shocker, I suppose. I really enjoyed my time watching the first 4 episodes. I watched them back to back, binged it, literally finished episode 4 just a few minutes ago, went straight to the camera and the mic, so here I am. And I really do mean that. And it is very enjoyable, I would say, for every single kind of audience member out there. But for me, and for you, and I'm talking about you, who's potentially a big Batverse fan, and you're a fan of Oz and everything like that, and you just wanted to see more, and you're excited to see how this could bridge the gap between part 1 and part 2. You want to see more of the criminal underbelly of Gotham and just get into the streets of everything. I would be very hard-pressed to believe if you didn't like this, and I really do just have a lot of positive things to say here. But starting off right at the beginning here, the show does indeed pick up right at the end of the movie. This is stuff that we already know, but just in case you haven't heard comments from Matt Reeves and Lauren LeFranc, the showrunner and whatnot, that is all true. So immediately, what I liked about it is, naturally after picking up after the end of the Batman, you do very much so see the impact on Gotham. It sets up all of the factors of the story, the state of the city, the looting, the rioting, the gang war, given the power vacuum of which this show pretty much centers around. And in so doing, immediately afterwards, you pick up with Oz at the very beginning of his first steps into vying for that power that has been left behind with that of the assassination of Colin Farrell at the hands of the Riddler. You see that the Iceberg Lounge is all run down, but the thing is, obviously, this is like an 8-episode season. 1 hour roughly per episode, so Oz has quite a long way to go to the top. There's other obstacles such as the Falcone crime syndicate remnants from Alberto, Johnny Vitti, Luca Falcone, like the list goes on. Sophia Falcone, all of that is just, littered everywhere in this series, and obviously so because you have all of these gangs of Gotham remaining behind. You even have the Maronis. You have Nadia Maroni, played by the fantastic Shohreh Aghdashloo, who is kind of still on the outside, while Clancy Brown's Salvatore Maroni's been serving time in Blackgate for the past 20 years, as we know, since Falcone ratted him out. So there's a lot of stuff for Oz to kind of navigate around, and most certainly he does do a lot of navigating. But the thing about Oz Cobblepot is that he is very smart. But I feel like Oz is at his best when he is somewhat winging it. That's not to say that Oz doesn't have a plan, but I think a part of the magic of this season, as I was watching it throughout the first 4 episodes, is that he does kind of have to adapt, maneuver around a certain situation that may not have gone according to plan, and that is where Oz's brilliance lies. Like, he always figures it out, and it's so craftily done, even if it's like a situation of his own making. And that kind of reminds me, and I'm gonna have to speak very ambiguously here, but I was watching episode 1, it's cooking along, cool, pick it up right after the end of the Batman, in a very familiar scene from the end of the Batman movie, which has been described out there publicly by the showrunner Matt Reeves, and boom, massive moment in the first 10-11 minutes of the episode, to the point of where it hits the ground running, and how serious the shit is that Oz has already got into within the first 10 minutes. A moment like this, already 10 minutes in, it really sets the tone for the series and the crucible that Oz is about to go onto, to the point of where, with regards to this specific moment I'm talking about, it was so unexpected that my mouth was actually left hanging open. And again, trust me, I'm very self-aware that I don't want to overhype things, so do bear in mind that I am very excitable right now. But genuinely, I can't really remember the last time I was watching a TV show where I was genuinely my mouth was hanging open. I was like, what? And I immediately went to my laptop being like, what the hell? So, damn, what a way to start the episode. And from that moment, as I kind of briefly teased before, the snowball really is going down the mountain. And before you already know it, you're already down the rabbit hole, given what happens in those first moments of episode 1. That really goes on to inform, everything else. Because obviously you have the gang war itself, but that thing that happens, which I keep saying, that thing, it really does inform extra things, extra layers and subplots that are going on in the series as well, that just make things very much so messier for Oz, to the point of where it's so dynamic. There's a lot of things going on, but it doesn't feel too overstuffed. That's the thing I really like, just speaking about the pace of things as you go throughout the episodes. I feel like it only very occasionally slows down, and when it does slow down, it does it deservingly so. You might need to set up some extra context for certain situations and characters and backstory there, because for example, we know we're getting flashbacks in this series because in the trailers you see Sophia in Arkham, so there are things like that of which happens. But I would say that it is extremely plot-driven, which is a personal favorite thing of mine, by the way. Who doesn't like plot-driven things? But what I mean by the personal favorite thing is that, given that it's only 8 episodes, I like that in a lot of series. I never used to have that opinion 6 years ago. It would have all been about, 22 episode CW style seasons. But with 8 episodes, it's always plot driven. It's always engaging. There's not really a scene that isn't important to either the main plot, another thing that's going on, or one of the characters, of which is very relevant. So you are always engrossed in what is happening in the show. Now, pretty early on, you do get introduced to Renzi Felice's Victor Aguila. I probably butchered the second name, but I think Victor, or should I say Renzi Felice, is incredible. He's absolutely incredible, and I saw why, Colin Farrell speaks of him so highly, because as Lauren LeFranc said, he's really the heart of the show in many, many ways. You see in the trailer initially, it's kind of almost like a little Jason Todd thing that happens. He's trying to take the rims off of Oz's car, and that leads to a bit of a confrontation, but there's almost this instant connection that happens between, Victor and Oz, and where Oz kind of identifies with him, and that was a nice touch, and you guys will get what I mean when you see that. It's quite a part of Victor's character in the way that Oz deals with something in day-to-day life, and I would say that Victor does as well, without saying too much. And again, I thought that was a really nice touch. But, Victor, I would say, is, as Lauren LeFranc said, in one way, a part of the heart of this show and very integral, but he's also like us in terms of the audience. He's being thrown into this, from doing that on the street to be like, oh my god, I am in this world now, to the point of where he is way in over his head. It's insane. But he is really the Robin to the Penguin's Batman, and their dynamic is just fantastic. Because he's quite, I don't know if I would say innocent, but he is a very endearing character. He's a good kid in the sense that, he could have gone down a very, very different path. But just because he's on this path with Oz, it doesn't eradicate the person he is. And that is something absolutely fascinating to watch unfold, because obviously, you know, Victor just gets further and further into this mess the more that Oz gets into this mess, and you see how both of those characters deal with it. But I really like how over time, you know, in the episodes, Oz, you know, has a soft spot for him. He really does. I think Oz as a character, living through being underestimated, ridiculed, being called the Penguin, mocked, everything under the sun there. As we know, he has a real fire in him. So he sees something in Victor where I would borderline say he's a bit protective over him. He's been a bit lonely, but he likes having Victor around. And I think there's like this, you know, little connection that even Victor feels with him, even though this is something kind of outside his world. But Victor, I know I keep rambling here, but Renzi Feliz does such a good job. And, you know, it makes me really care about his character, especially with how he's even springboarded into this story with his backstory, which, without saying too much, is rooted into that of the events of the Batman and the Riddler's attack and the flooding of Gotham. Let's just say that, albeit that his character is one that isn't usually typically associated with this line of work, even though that could change along the way, he is in a position to be in this new place in life. I really do like, and I'm sure you guys will as well, seeing these two characters connect, and even seeing that side of Oz Cobblepot shine through as well. And how have I neglected to talk about Oz up until this point in the review? Oz in this series is fantastic. Like, people were raving about Colin Farrell's performance and just what he brought to the Penguin in the Batman, and now that you've got a show called The Penguin, I think people will be absolutely raving about this as well. This show shows you everything about Oz that you saw in the Batman, but obviously since you get time to explore more about the character, that is exactly what you get in all different ways as well. So you will see the hustler Oz, the one who is winging it in a situation of action to the point of something that he didn't even predict happening, and it's just crazy, and he does what he thinks is necessary. You literally see that in the trailers. You know, he's not scared whatsoever to get his hands dirty or kill someone or something like that. So, you know, it's like similar to what Lauren LeFranc said. Don't get me wrong, like, Oz isn't a great good guy. He will be doing bad things, but, you know, people and characters are multifaceted. So the ways that they show these other sides to Oz, so we've already been over Victor, but there's other parts as well, such as Oz's mother. And this shines a whole new light on things of which, you know, really do start to make a lot of sense, because you get to see what impact that she's had on his life. Like, you know, even the way from how she talks to him, it's with love, but it can also be very much so a backhanded kind of love, very tough on him. Now, without saying too much, Oz's mother needs to be taken care of at the same time, and, you know, this is quite a concern for Oz in the series, and this kind of situation also sets up for some really special scenes between them both, which again shows an intimacy to Oz, which you don't often get to see, but a determination to provide her with a life that is more than what she lives right now, and live up to her extremely high expectations. He just, you know, really doesn't want to let her down. There's so many things of, you know, what you get into that you might not expect, to even like Oz's apartment. That's really cool. His, you know, larger family than just his mother. I don't want to say too much, but obviously with a whole series dedicated to the Penguin, you do get into little cracks of things that really give you a better understanding of the character and just what formed him to be the Penguin in the present day Batverse. But then the next minute, amongst all of this severity of things that might be happening, like really high stakes stuff, Oz is very funny, in the same vein of like the humor that you would have had in the Batman that might have made you chuckle, like, you know, what are you showing me, and things like that. And don't get the wrong impression here, like, this is by far not a comedy show, but the way they still weave that in there to his character, you know, just these moments of levity, if you will, in scenes that can even be serious, is just fantastic. It really is just embedded and interwoven with Oz as a character. He can be oddly charming in his own way, very intimidating in another way, but also, again, pretty funny at times as well, and there's many moments that I think you guys will enjoy, whether that's even between, Sophia and Penguin, to Penguin and the Falcones, or the larger family of the Falcones, to definitely Victor and Penguin. Now, as for Sophia Falcone, oh man, I can't say enough good things about Kristen Milioti. I'm sorry if I'm butchering names here, but she is an absolute powerhouse, beyond what I ever expected, and I really do mean that. As you start off, it's like, okay, she's introduced into the series, she's back out of Arkham now, but the more you follow her journey, especially where I just left things off with episode 4, it is a wild ride. She is absolutely fantastic, and I think you guys are gonna love her. Sophia is very, very, very smart, and I think that's what binds Oz and Sophia together. Like, don't get me wrong, they have a shared history, and I can't get too much into that, but obviously Penguin's been Falcone's right-hand man for a while, so his path did most certainly cross Sophia's path before she went into Arkham a while back, and that whole backstory there is extremely intriguing. But I really like the parallels between both characters. It's a very interesting dynamic, one that is born of I would say, tension, and the story that brings them together in the first couple of episodes or so forms a dance between them that is a very intriguing start to then an eventual, somewhat as the trailers get across, alliance between them both that I would say is still on a very, very, very thin line at all times, which just makes things all the more interesting, because as we know, we have Oz, who wants to be the kingpin, and it can only kind of be one kingpin, and Sophia, as per what she has said in the trailers, she feels pushed out by the family. They're obviously all vying for their own positions of power in the new, obviously, power vacuum that everyone is going through, but she is not gonna really let anybody get in her way. So again, just like Oz, like Sophia has to very interestingly weave and maneuver throughout her own obstacles that ultimately bring these two characters together. And as I've written down in my notes here, or even as I said earlier, Sophia starts off, I don't know if I would want to say tame, but it's like nothing compared to where she gets to in the episodes that I've seen, and that's only half of the season, to the point of where, as I said, she's so stern, smart, formidable, but then there's this cracks of unhingedness to her that are very justified given what she's gone through, because the trailers absolutely put across, this is no spoilers, and it's in the comics anyway, that she was outed as the Hangman Killer. So she's been through a lot, having gone to Arkham, of which is a whole other thing that I'm about to get into. And let me just say, with regards to the whole Hangman Killer thing, it is somewhat as I roughly, not too much expected, because my expectations were 100% subverted in some ways, but at the same time, as I always say, adaptations don't copy and paste. There's innovation when you bring things into live action, so I will most certainly tease that there is innovation with, Sophia Falcone, the whole Hangman Killer thing to the comics, and how they do that I thought was really, really interesting, and even as Matt Reeves says himself, actually ties back to seeds from the first movie, to the point of where you get revelations, especially as you get into episode 4, where it's like, oh, okay, that actually really does kind of make sense, but also paints Sophia in a really, really intriguing light, because what I will say is, as I've already gone over, there are flashbacks, not even just flashbacks to Sophia, but there's flashbacks to Victor, his whole backstory, and they're very organically woven in the episodes, but with Sophia, it really is something else. But you still, despite her being the character she is, just like Oz, look at her and think, like, damn, like, I don't blame you to the point of where you've got. Like, you can empathize with the character just like Oz, without sacrificing any of the character traits that make them Oz Cobblepot, the Penguin, or Sophia Falcone, So that's something that I really prioritize in my enjoyment of a series, of what, needs to be a little bit of a checkbox in a show, is really character-driven stuff, and it just really didn't disappoint there with Sophia. Now, as you get more into her story and you get into episode 4, I can really only say so much here, but what I will say is, as per what the trailers teased, you do get into Arkham, and all I can really say is that, my God, this just made me want an Arkham show. You know, how we were originally meant to, even though it was just a concept in early active development at the time, we were meant to be getting a Batverse, Matt Reeves Batverse, Arkham show, as Matt Reeves self-described as like a haunted house that is Arkham. And oh man, I imagine some people are watching me right now being like, oh god, he's just glazing it, he's just overhyping it, but it's like, there's so much potential there, and I've already seen this, and that was awesome with Sophia's time in Arkham, and that is a real treat. And this is where other characters, as per seen in the trailer, you get Theo Rossi. I'm a big fan of his work in Sons of Anarchy and whatnot. He's Dr. Julian Rush at Arkham, and he ties into present day as well, but there's only so much I can say there. All I'm trying to say is it's like, it's just giving, if you're a fan of the Batverse, so much in so many ways. And, you know, I spoke of Easter eggs earlier. There was like 5 or 6 I already mentally noted without even combing over the episodes. And I'm talking like, let me just say, it's the kind of Easter egg where it's like, oh, they did that. That is that thing in the Batman lore. And it's like they reference that, and it's there. And they're not just like, oh, we're just gonna chuck this in for the sake of it. It's more just like cool world-building stuff, and maybe the odd cheeky thing where it's like, hey, here's a little reference to that. As for like even the visuals of this series, guys, you are in for an absolute treat. It is so cool. It's so reminiscent of the scene with like the drop head at the beginning of the Batman, because you really are, as we know in the Penguin series, on the streets of Gotham. And I feel like we didn't really get a whole bunch, believe it or not. I mean, we did and we didn't, of the street level locations like that in the first movie. And I would say that is, you know, 85% of this show. And that location at the beginning of the Batman was just so cool to me. It was very, you know, Batman Year One, Bruce walking down the street. I just want to speak highly of all of that, because it's a real treat to see how, like, don't worry about if you're concerned about how this could feel different from Matt Reeves' Gotham. I'll say they nailed it on the head. And if anything, complemented it, because you get to see more and more of the locations that maybe you even wanted to see more of in the actual movie. And we are very much so in the muck of Gotham, seeing not only the streets, but various different clubs, different gangs, and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. Now, overall, like, the plan that Oz is executing here, as it gets divulged more throughout the first and second and third episode, you do see how smart he is and how you can genuinely begin to believe that he can actually claw his way to the top. The first episode is a great appetizer to how, you know, things are just going to progress to the point of where things get involved with, you know, Clancy Brown's Maroni, and I obviously can't divulge too much about that, of the conversation they had in Blackgate, but, you know, in the trailer, Penguin's talking about Shocker here tearing down Falcone's empire from the inside out, and Maroni, despite being in Blackgate for a long time, is still really wise, and he remembers a lot of important details about the old days, you could say. And so there are progression scenes like that where you have things being figured out. Obviously, it's not going to be like John Wick every second with regards to action, but when you do get action, it is where it's very much so warranted. I think Craig Sobel did a really good job in directing all the 4 episodes that I've seen. I think the writing, for the most part, like, in my mind, I didn't really find any issues with it, other than, I would say, just some nitpicks. You know, just being very transparent here. It depends, I guess, on the type of viewer you are, but there were certain scenes where I was like, you know, okay, so Oz might have got out of this situation, or Victor, in where it's like, well, if that he opened that door and it closed, what if somebody was there? It could have all been over there and then, or implicated, you know, these characters into something that another character or two would have found out, and that would have definitely have spelt, like, again, things being over there and there. So there is conveniences, and thus, I guess you could say, in a critical word, you know, a contrivance or two. But I wouldn't say they're egregious, and I would say that the show, in its overall writing and every other facet and area that makes up, you know, the sum of all the parts of the show, at such a high quality that it's easy to kind of look over those things. And another thing is, my rule of thumb is with contrivances and stuff like that, I only get bothered by them when they're beat after beat after beat after beat. be. And we've all seen shows like that where it's like convenience after convenience. Oh, it's like, what, isn't that convenient? Like every second, to the point of where it's hard to take the show seriously. So I wouldn't say it's in that level of things at all, but I just wanted to put that little nitpicky part of my brain in here. And as far as like bridging the gap between the Batman Part 1 and, you know, Part 2, I would say that just happens inherently with what this series is. Well, as of the end of the Batman Part 1, there's a power vacuum. There's going to be a lot of, you know, gang war happening. So that's already happening as of, you know, actually episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. Everything I've seen so far, halfway through the season. But there isn't any, like, you know, people looking for, like, larger, massive connective tissue that will link into the first scene of the Batman Part 2. Obviously, I haven't seen anything substantial like that right now. I mean, I'm only halfway through the journey. And again, the only obvious thing is that through Oz elevating himself up into Kingpin status, that is the most obvious connective tissue that will be going into the Batman Part 2, because, well, one of Batman's biggest problems, you could argue, on the scale of things in crime in the city, will be the Kingpin of the criminal underbelly. So I just wanted to put that out there just to, like, set expectations that out of the 4 episodes, it is very crime driven, very Penguin oriented. Sophia, it's all about the family, as they call them in the show, you know, the Falcone crime syndicate, the other things that bleed out into that messiness. It's not like there's like a new Rogues Gallery villain being teed up in episode 3, minute 32, and stuff like that. So don't think that's gonna happen right now. I can't speak for the last 4 episodes. Even though you can watch this without having seen the Batman and just enjoy it as a, you know, crime gang war kind of show, it still does heavily pertain to it does feel like a Batverse show. So if you couldn't tell already, all I can do here is ramble and ramble and ramble about, you know, left, right, and center, how much I really enjoy this show, how much as a big Batverse fan this means to me in terms of it being as good as it is. Now, I do want to say, is this show for everyone? I do think that fans who just are only interested into, to put it really bluntly here, a good example I would say is, like, if you didn't enjoy Andor that much, and to you Star Wars is about the Force and the lightsabers, and so when you watch Andor, it's just like you know, yeah, okay, it may be a high-quality written show, but it's just not so much for me. I want the Force grip and Force lightning and lightsaber swoosh. Then I would say this is a similar thing to that, because I could maybe put you in the same box as being like, well, okay, if this is a show that isn't a Batman movie, so there's no, like, you know, Batman flinging around every corner in it, will you be interested in it as much as you would be the Batman or the Batman Part 2? That is something I heavily want to emphasize, that I'm not putting down this show as I'm saying this, because it is great, and I feel like I've got that across in this review, but I know that there's still dozens and dozens and, well, way more than that, of types of fans who just, you know, feel like stuff like this is just a bit too much outside of the entertainment they prefer to consume with this world of characters. They might just want to tune into the Batman movies. But if you go into it knowing that it's still set in the Batverse, it's furthering the story in ways that will ripple out, and it's got great acting, really good writing, amazing visuals, amazing just cinematography galore, like everything like that, and you just want to lap up more of this world, then this will be very fitting for you. But at the same time, there are those fans who, and fair enough to them, it's just their preference, right, who view things like, or larger characters like Batman, as absolutely fundamental, just like my Star Wars analogy, where if you don't have a lightsaber or a Jedi or a Sith in it, that's fundamental to them, so they're not really interested in another type of show. For example, Andor, it might be boring to them. But for me, who's, you know, open to both sides of things completely, the Penguin is just absolutely chef's freaking kiss. In another opportunity for me to freaking dive deeper into this world, and it does not fail to do that. It doesn't disappoint. I do fully expect this series to get glowing reviews. I would be so shocked if it didn't. I would be so gobsmacked. So I'm going to end the video there. I do apologize if somehow I didn't get across something in this review that maybe you would have liked me to, which it sounds ridiculous because of how long I've spoken already. But again, my hands are tied, and all I can do best is just ramble and kind of tangent and go off topic into all these different areas to try and just give you the vibe of the Penguin show. But I tried with limited time, by the way. Like, I am in a rush. Like, I've got to edit this and quickly get to packing and then go on my way. So I do apologize if this video wasn't as prepared as it could have been, but I still wanted to get something out there by the embargo date of today. But guys, if you liked this video, leave your support by just leaving a like on it. It really does help me out. Definitely subscribe for Penguin episode breakdowns. I'm gonna love you and leave you now, so just thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, fellow Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.